All right, the pro line. So this was kind of, what did it come? Is it late 80s? Is it early 90s?
This is 91.
91.
Yeah, 1991.
Okay, open it on 3. 1, 2,
What?
3. Go, 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 go!
We're on the hunt for a Dave Wyman card here.
Ladies and gentlemen, we found him.
All right, we're going through a stack of Pro Line cards here. I want to apologize to all my teammates upstairs that had to go and painfully go through this until they found the one of me. Pro Line cards, just talking to Brent Stecker about this. This was the NFLPA, the Players Association, tried to come and get all the players to sign off to only do their approved cards so they could make money off of it. And the NFL came and invented Pro Line, which I believe is the clothing company or the clothes that everybody's wearing in here. And they were paying a good amount of money. Now this first guy, Lawrence Taylor, I'm guessing that he made a lot more than I did. So, but I'll just go ahead and tell you it was 1990, 92, I believe. And they gave me $10,000. So I'm sure that he was getting 100,000, you know, a guy like LT. But I took the proceeds and went and bought a 1971 Buick Skylark with a soft top, and it was a, can't say that, sorry. It was a really cool car, really cool car. All right, I'll just go through some of these. LT changed the game. I mean, if you've ever read The Blind Side, it's really interesting because they tried to block him all different ways, but he's the reason why left tackles are paid so much, and he was just a terror, man. I love playing against him, watching him out on the field. Kevin Green, the thing I remember most about him is that he hit Elway so hard one time. John didn't see him, and both of their feet came off the ground, and it was like they were suspended 3 yards off the field and then just slammed Elway down. And Elway never limped or never rolled around writhing in pain. And I asked him about that one time because we used to make fun of Shannon Sharp because every time he'd go down, oh my God, it was like it was an emergency, and then he runs off and it's like, well, what happened there? Anyway, John, his comment on that was that I never wanted anybody to think that they got me. I was like, that's pretty tough. Jim McMahon, funniest story I have about him, we got a friend in common, Ken Marjoram, who helped me rehab my knee at Stanford. He was a Stanford wide receiver. McMahon and Marjoram were both kind of free spirit, wild men type of guys. And so he knew Kenny really well. So when he was late in his career, when Jim McMahon was playing in San Diego, I got a roughing the passer penalty on him. It was like a late hit where he slid and I tackled him. And I was up arguing with the ref, and Jim was standing there and he goes, hey, you heard from Marjoram at all? So, like right in the middle of this big debate, and I just started having a conversation with him. Derek Thomas, maybe one of the greatest performances ever. Was it 6 sacks that he had? 6, and he missed the 7th one. I can't remember, there were so many, but Dave Craig somehow spinning out of that in 1990 at Kansas City, throws a touchdown pass to Scansy that almost knocks him off his feet, and Dave was like running the other way and threw across his body. And then we went through the airport at Kansas City, and there was a bar on the way, and so we all filed into this bar, and it delayed the plane. And then Chuck came into the room looking like he was really angry, and he rolled off a couple of $100 bills and bought everybody drinks. And so we had a party in the Kansas City airport because Derek Thomas missed his 7th sack. This is one of my heroes, Jeff Kemp. I, of course, played with his dad. His son, Jeff. But yeah, Jack Kemp was, and he's got 4 kids, grandkids, one of which is Corey Kemp, who works for the Seahawks. And but Jack Kemp, I remember the jump pass. There's a picture of him standing in midair, it looks like, and he's throwing the ball, and just a really good player. I think Brent Stecker is actively subverting me. That was what somebody said about Russell Wilson. He put Keith Byers in here because he knows that Keith Byers, one time when I was really tired in the middle of a long drive in Philadelphia, it was 110 degrees on the field, and Keith Byers came busting through the line, and he put his helmet between the 9 and the 2, and I just went right on my back. And I remember thinking, this is going to look really bad on film. And it did. It did look bad. Marty Schottenheimer, I remember this guy, and I talked to his son, Brian, about how much I appreciated Marty Schottenheimer. What a great coach. And he's part of that Kansas City. He was very disappointed on that day that Dave Craig avoided the Derek Thomas sack. Howie Long, Mr. Perfect. One time I was screaming and yelling at one of his teammates on the field because he tried to gouge my eye out on field goal rush, and I was just going crazy, losing it. And I remember Howie Long standing out there with his hands on his hips. He looks over at me and just shakes his head like, "What are you doing, dude?" And I'm like, "Yeah, that's right. I'm going to get him. I'm going to get your teammate." Just lost my mind. Andy Heck. Andy Heck and I were not friends when we played together. He was a first-round draft choice. I know he thought that I thought I was really smart, and I thought that he thought he was really smart. And I saw him a couple years ago. He's coaching, he's now a Super Bowl champion, coaching offensive line for Kansas City, and we had the nicest discussion about, shook hands, caught up, family, whole thing, and it just, I just always remember that I was a little bit more tightly wound when I was a player. You kind of had to be that way. So I love running into guys after their career because it just seems like they're kinder, gentler, nicer people. And I just had the best conversation with Andy Heck, and it was really one of my favorite interactions with teammates that I had in the past because we would bark at each other all the time. I didn't like Andy, Andy didn't like me, and it was really cool. Steve Largent, the best ever. One time, somebody told me at practice that Steve Largent, they traded me my rookie year and I failed a physical and got sent back, and I made a couple plays on the field in practice, and I guess he turned to somebody and said, "I can't believe we tried to trade Dave Wyman away." And that meant so much to me coming from Steve Largent that I'll never forget that. It was really a cool moment, and when a guy like that says something about you, it's amazing. Jacob Green, maybe the best leader I've ever been around. And that team, him and Dave Craig, they had the best chemistry of including everybody. We would go out to have, beers or whatever, kind of camaraderie night, and it would be guys from the South, it would be the kicker, it would be guys from the North, guys from California, offense, defense, everybody was included, and that was because of Jacob Green and what a great leader he was. Yeah, you can't tell, oh, that's Brian Blades. Blades, he should be in the Ring of Honor. That guy, it was my second year, his rookie year, he caught so many passes and was just such a great player, just clutch. And he was a little guy, kind of like Doug Baldwin size, and yet he was brave, man. He would take hits over the middle. Here's Eugene Robinson. Number one, he has on Zubaz, which are the hokiest pants ever. I had 3 pairs of them. But then also, he has that saxophone around his neck. He used to play that saxophone in between practices. He was terrible. And I remember one of our linebackers said it sounded like somebody was strangling a cat when he would play the saxophone. So I don't know what he thinks putting that around his neck. He's awful. Great teammate. Love Eugene. Stay in touch with him all the time. Here's the nicest guy maybe I've ever met, Dan McGuire. And for whatever reason, he just could not play pro football. He was really good at San Diego State. We all remember it, but he couldn't complete a swing route. I mean, and I hate saying that about him because he's such a nice guy and very professional guy, and just the NFL wasn't for him. Everybody finds their ceiling, and he did. And he's a first-round draft choice, which I know that Chuck did not want to draft him. I think he wanted Brett Favre. So how about that? And a buddy of mine, Paul Moyer, was coach that year, and he said after the owner drafted him, it was Ken Behring who really wanted Dan McGuire, not Chuck. And so Chuck called all the coaches in and says, "You guys better coach your tails off this year because it's going to be a long year." Sure enough, it was. Dave Craig, maybe the most competitive person I've ever been around. Annoyingly competitive. And Dave would say the same thing about me, I suppose. But Dave, the more every day I love him more. He's just such a great guy. But him and Jacob Green, like I said, such great leaders. But Dave, not a ton of talent, but he was the most competitive guy and just always thought that we had a chance to win. He's kind of like Russell Wilson. You hear Patrick Mahomes mic'd up saying, "Hey, we got a chance. Come on, let's go. Give me your best." Dave was doing that constantly, except he did run on the field one time to argue a call when he was out of the game, and he was icing his wrist, and I never forget this. He goes running out with this ice bag on his hand because he got hurt and was knocked out of the game, and was arguing with the official, and of course they threw a flag on his dumb. So yeah, I remember thinking, Dave, what are you doing, man? The other thing was when he got picked off by Deion Sanders. Deion, I was down at the other 30-yard line, and he ran right past me. And by the time Deion got to me, he was taking like 7-yard strides, and about this much of his foot was touching the ground. And then he was doing this thing, and I look behind him, and there's Dave, like you know, like when you're a little kid and you're trying to show your mom you're running hard and you're pumping your fists and just tearing up the ground. And I'm like, Dave, you're embarrassing yourself. Anyway, love Dave. Obviously, I think he's a Hall of Fame guy. I do. 19 years, and there's something about who's never had a losing season on a team that he started for. Played in Chicago, played in Kansas City, played in Arizona. I have so many Dave Craig stories. But Cortez Kennedy, just talked to Walter Jones about this. He said one time Tez called him at 4 o'clock in the morning. And I said one time at 2 o'clock in the morning, he jumped out of my closet at camp because he was always up and roaming the hallways. He was the only guy I ever met that was excited to go to double days. And I got up to go to the bathroom and kind of, you know, when you're trying to not wake up, you keep your eyes kind of closed. Went to the bathroom, I come back in the dorm, and he springs out like a jack-in-the-box out of my closet and scares me. And he really loved telling that story because I went like, ah! So anyway, yeah, Tez was such a good guy. I miss him. Tragically passed a couple years ago, but what a great guy. Tony Woods, that's my guy. He was drafted in the first round. He went and with his first round money and bought a black Mercedes sedan, most beautiful car you've ever seen. And the vets called him Mr. T because he did have a lot of like gold jewelry and stuff. I drove a really beat up S10 pickup truck that was a 1982 model, and the vets really appreciated that. But Tony still is the nicest guy. I miss him because I remember him knocking on the door at the hotel room when we first went to camp, and he goes, hey, you know, and this is back in the day when not everybody would communicate with each other that much. And you know, the adjoining door, he knocks on it and I open it up and he goes, hey, I'm Tony, I'm the first rounder, I know you're the second rounder, and just wanted to say hi, and we've been friends ever since, although I've not really had much contact with Tony. I always felt like if I'd have been the first rounder and he'd have been the second rounder, that people would have looked at my career not as good, you know, because there's so much pressure being a first rounder, but Tony was good. It was just, I think everybody expected him to be a lot better. Oh, you had to put this guy in here too. The Nigerian Nightmare, Christian Okoye. I met him afterwards and I really wanted him to be a jerk after we played. He was the sweetest, nicest guy I always say ever met, but he was really an awesome guy. And I did actually have a couple of hits on him, but they wrote in Sports Illustrated one time that he left me flat on my back. It was the only time I was ever in Sports Illustrated. That didn't feel good. But yeah, he was a tough dude, man. I mean, and they had, you know, we had Marty Schottenheimer earlier. They had like this huge offensive line. They were 6'5", 6'6", 320, and you'd hit those guys, and then here comes this guy. And he weighs 240 pounds, all muscle, so yeah, he was a tough guy. Randall Cunningham, I was supposed to spy him in the game. It was the opener in 1989. It was like 104 degrees on the field, and I was supposed to spy him, and I never spied him. He ran away. He's still running. I never tackled him. Really good player. Ed McCaffrey does shows now. I know he was doing the color for the Broncos. I'm not sure, but I did a show with him, and he told me that I was one of 2 players that he was afraid of. I was like, okay, good. It's because he was a freshman when I was a senior at Stanford. And yeah, just a kind of a goofy guy, honestly, and I would say that to his face. He's odd dude, but really good, nice guy. I texted him before the Carolina game because we're getting ready to play Christian McCaffrey. His 2 boys are just amazing. Max was a player at Duke, and then Christian, I think, is the best running back in the league. John Elway, best competitor maybe. next to Dave Craig, toughest guy I've ever met. I like telling this story. He wouldn't like it, but like he had a bad body. Like his chest plate came together to a point. He was pigeon-toed. He just, was just not a great-looking athlete. And I was getting taped one time before a Monday Night Football game, and I'm just getting there. My ankle's up, getting taped, and I just kind of look out in the locker room, and he's out there taking his clothes off and getting, dressed into his uniform, and I'm looking and going, man, that guy's an NFL player, and he's probably the most player that ever played the game. He was just incredible. It was like but I mean, the guy was an athlete, obviously, could play baseball, everything, but best play I ever saw him make, there was a tribute to him when he went into the Hall of Fame, and actually there's a clip of me and him having a conversation on the side of because he blocked somebody, and I go, that was one of my favorite plays, when you blocked a guy in a reverse. I said that, and the one that you threw to Shannon Sharp in the Kingdome, and a lot of fans will remember this, 1993, they ran a blitz, and he ducked, stood up, flat-footed, and threw it about 50 yards in the air to Shannon Sharp. Just incredible. Jeff Hosteller, he had to put this one in here. I actually called him and apologized, tried to anyway. He's the guy that I hit out of bounds and got kicked out of the game in the Monday Night Football game. And I remember him calling me a sucker. You sucker, you sucker. And I'm like, why not curse words if you're that mad? Supposedly I broke, some bone in his neck because I went to block him and he moved and I did this. It was one of those things like that. And so whenever I see a guy do stuff like that on the field, I kind of feel sorry for him, because sometimes you do things that you didn't think. I didn't think to do that. I was just trying to get a block on him. And when he moved, I thought, well, I better get my elbow out there. And it looks terrible. But yeah, I got kicked out. Went into the locker room and tipped over a huge table full of Gatorade. And the equipment guy, head equipment guy at that time was a guy named Doug West. And I called him a few years ago and apologized for that. I never even thought of who cleaned up all the Gatorade, because I was so angry. But I ended up getting fined, and then everybody was calling me a dirty player and everything, and it was a mistake. I really did not mean to, but I've never seen him since. But I did. My agent had me call and apologize, and I was all ready to do it. And I ended up getting somebody with the Raiders, and oh yeah, well, he's not available, so I'll tell him you called. And I'm like, all right, that's all I could do. But I've never run into him. I know he's a tough guy, and he I believe won a Super Bowl against the Bills. So yeah, but that was one of those things from my career that the older I get, the more, I don't want to say ashamed, but I regret it. I wish I hadn't done that, but it was not premeditated in any way. And so for that reason, I guess it's given me the perspective that, when you see somebody make a hit on the field, and sometimes you'll hear guys, people go, oh, that guy's a scumbag, and he this and that. I'm like, it happens so fast out there that, I always give those guys a break, because I guarantee you I did not want to do that. I didn't want to get fined $12,000. I didn't want to get kicked out of the game. I didn't want to get called a dirty player by 3 Hall of Famers on a national TV show. I think it was Joe Montana, Mike Ditka, and Gibbs, the coach for the Redskins. So yeah, I mean, I always feel sorry for guys that go through that and have something where it happens and it was a split-second thing and you put your head down or whatever. And yeah, for that reason, it's given me that kind of perspective. Oh, jeez. My daughter, I have a huge blown up one of these, and she constantly will go in there and put these little quote bubbles coming out and tape it on there. You're a loser. All these different things. They like making fun of me over this, but I should be made fun of because this is pretty hokey. Yeah, I missed the date. So again, Proline was the company by the NFL that wanted us to do cars, and they were offering, for me, it was $10,000. So I missed my date here in Seattle I don't know if I was on vacation or something. I couldn't make it. I think I was probably having a surgery. That was commonplace for me. But so I had to fly to LA and do the shoot in the LA Raider weight room. And so I go in there, I've got all this Seahawk stuff on that they put me in. And then they're spraying water on me. And I'm like, what is this? They're like, it's sweat. Okay. They wanted me to look like I was sweaty and I was working out. And so I'm standing there doing this, and these offensive linemen and probably half the guys that, I don't know if they knew who I was, but they could probably figure it out. And I was just like, I started sweating bullets just without the mist, because I'm like, I couldn't imagine what I would think if a Raider came into our weight room, but here I am, a Seahawk coming in there, and and I used to get in fights in almost every Raider game, and so yeah, that was kind of stressful there, but the $10,000 helped. I felt kind of cheesy doing this, but then I saw other people's, and some of these pictures are pretty bad.
Who do you think found it, that card in our pack opening?
Jim Moore.
It was Danny.
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 Oh.
Look at that. He's a strapping young lad.
What do you think about that?
Yeah. Well, I couldn't think of a nicer guy to do it. I love Danny, so I'm just glad it wasn't Jim.
Oh.
Brent Jones. Did you get it?
Oh, we struck gold here.
It's not Wyman.
I know it's not Wyman. That's not striking gold. Finding
Wyman
Wyman's
is
card.
gold.
Jim would have had a lot of things to say about it. I would have gotten a hard time for a long time.